Hey there. Hope you have the time to listen. Sorry, I just can't help myself. Fate just dropped off her notes on the next profile. So let's see if it's a good one. Alright, a sassy fallen angel whose journey is a real rollercoaster. That should be a fun story to tell. I hope you enjoy the tale, and if you have any questions, please let me know. Name: Lexie Edison. Race: speak no evil fallen cherub. Sex: female. Age: 17. Height: childlike. Shape: toned. Magic class: none. Occupation: Eclipse House Orphanage, team lead. Affiliation: Nevin Club. Organization: 13. Charity club. Family: Elliot Edison, father, deceased. Patience Edison, mother, forcibly converted. Harlan Edison, younger brother. Relationships: Corey Mills, boyfriend. Mandy Delarose, girlfriend. Iris Featherfall, best friend. Aaron Ravenwood, confidant. Kaiser Killick, friend. Patrick Wyatt, friend. Chalice Schneider, friend. Background: Lexie was born in Fair Silver to the kind of family angels like to hold up as proof the system worked. Her mother was an angel in Madeline's service. Her father the disciple assigned to guard her. A pairing so common it was practically expected. Duty meant proximity, and proximity, when it landed right, meant love. From the beginning they refused to let the word cherub mean less. Lexie's wings and body were small and soft. Her rank officially minor, but in their house that just meant she could go everywhere the others went without the weight of expectation. They raised her to believe she was capable of anything any angel was and more, and they proved every day that they believed it. She learned to walk under stained glass shadows and night watch briefing calls, trailing after her mother's heels and her father's hand like a second oath. When Lexie was 5, Harlan arrived. He came into the world as a regular angel, average height like their mother. In other families that might have drawn a quiet line between them. Lexie never saw it that way. She fell in love on sight with the soft, squirming bundle they put in her arms. All downy feathers and wobbly halo. If there was any part of her that noticed his rank would outrun hers one day, it got buried under the simple fact that he was hers to protect. She promised him that in the blunt, literal way children make vows. She would always look out for him. She would always be there. From then on, Fair Silver streets knew them as a pair. Tiny cherub sister marching ahead, baby brother clutching her hand and copying everything she did. Night Watch was the third parent in their house. Both mother and father served the organization, taking the missions that were supposed to manifest the angel goddess Madeline's will and spread her influence across the world. For Lexie, the uniforms and sigils were wallpaper. People came and went, debriefing at the kitchen table while she colored in the margins. Missions were normal, the way other kids thought of their parents' long shifts at the factory or the shop. When her parents were called away, Lexie knew the routine. Her father would kiss her forehead. Her mother would smooth Harlan's hair, and they would tell the children they were doing important work. Night Watch protected everyone. Madeline watched over them. They would be back. When Lexie was 8, the mission order came again. Both parents left together. That wasn't new. What was new was the way they came back. Days later, only her father staggered through the door, bleeding through his coat. Between gasps of air he told Lexie and Harlan that their mother had been taken, kidnapped in the chaos, maybe dead, maybe worse. He didn't have enough details to give them a clean enemy, so he gave them the only sentence that stuck. She isn't coming home. Lexie was old enough to understand what that meant. Harlan wasn't. He was 3. He wanted to know when she would be back and why no one was looking harder. Why Night Watch wasn't tearing the sky apart to find her. His grief came in shuddering waves. Hours of crying that would quiet to hiccups and then surge again at the smallest reminder. Lexie split herself between roles. In one room she helped tend to her father, changing bandages with shaking hands and pretending she didn't notice when he bit down on the sheet instead of crying out. In another she held Harlan through every storm, telling him stories about how strong their mother was and how she would never want to see him this sad. Days blurred. Nights got shorter. Eventually exhaustion came for Lexie too. One afternoon, bone-tired from too many half-sleeps on the edge of her brother's bed, Lexie finally passed out for real. When she woke, it was to the sound of her mother's voice. It was wrong. Shaky, cracked around the edges, but undeniably hers. For one stunned second Lexie thought something in her had broken. Maybe she was dreaming, maybe she had slipped into some feverish wish. Then she heard another sound layered under it. Harlan's laugh, high and relieved in a way it hadn't been since the announcement. That got her moving. She stumbled down the hall, bare feet loud on the floor. She turned the corner and found the impossible. Harlan was wrapped in their mother's arms. Sakura pink light slowly engulfing him. His face pressed to her chest, tiny fingers fisted in her fur. Their mother was talking to him softly, apologizing for scaring him, for going away, for everything that had happened. For half a heartbeat, Lexie's whole world snapped back into place. Then her brain caught up to what her eyes were actually seeing. Up close the changes were obvious. Her body had the soft, unreal curves of a Sakura bunny. For where there should have been skin. Ears too long, eyes too bright. The wrong race altogether. Lexie froze, nausea crawling up her throat. Harlan didn't see it. He just clung tighter, sobbing with relief. Their mother met Lexie's stare over his head and, with what pieces of herself were still clear, tried to explain. When their father had been torn apart on that mission, she had felt something in her break. Wrath had risen, hot and wild. The kind that could drag an angel straight out of Madeline's flock. Before she could fall, a Sakura bunny working unknowingly for Silent Owl had offered her a way out. Let them convert her and she would be spared the agony of the fall. Spared the shame of becoming unworthy. Half crazed with fear and love, she agreed. By the time she understood what she had traded away, it was already too late. She had known how dangerous she was now, but with worry and love in her heart she had run home anyway. Sakura bunnies were made to purify through conversion. Touch and closeness did the rest. Female bunnies had another instinct layered on top. An urge to hook people on their milk until they would do anything for another taste. Lexie's mother had fought those impulses with everything she had left, refusing to drag her children down that particular horror. But Harlan had hurled himself into her arms before she had even gotten fully through the door, trusting her the way he always had. She had held him without thinking, because of course she had. The moment stretched just long enough for the Sakura magic to do its work. By the time she had pulled herself together, Harlan was changing. His eyes went glassy, his body blurred at the edges, feathers thinning and then disappearing. The light in the room felt wrong. Their mother kept talking, voice going bright and cheerful in a way that made Lexie's skin crawl. She apologized again, this time for what she had done, for bringing this curse into their home. Then she turned Harlan around with careful hands and showed Lexie what he had become. Her baby brother, remade as one of the creatures that had taken their mother from them in the first place. Something in Lexie snapped. Heat roared through her small body, too big for her bones. If she had been older, if the clock had already rolled past 12 years, that fury would have had somewhere obvious to go. She would have fallen to the sin of wrath. Another statistic for the Night Watch files. But she was 8. The system that measured the 7 classic sins couldn't catch her yet, so the anger had nowhere to fall. It settled instead like molten lead in her chest, pressing on every rib, every breath. She couldn't swing at her mother. Love went down too deep for that. No matter what new skin her mother wore. She couldn't reach Silent Owl, or the nameless bunny who had offered the solution out in the field. What she could reach was a promise. Lexie lifted her chin and threw her vow at the universe with every shred of will she had. She promised, with everything she was and everything she would ever be, that she would kill every Sakura bunny she could find. She would wipe them off the face of the earth for taking her family. She would hunt them until there were none left to hurt anyone else. It wasn't metaphor. In that moment she meant genocide in the most literal sense a child could understand. Angels were not built to carry a vow like that. Her young age protected her from the numbered sins. But there were other cracks in Madeline's design. Trauma-born taboos, the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, faults that grew where pain had nowhere else to go. The system couldn't label her wrath yet, but it could refuse to let her mouth be the place that kind of promise lived. As the last word left her lips, something seized her jaw. Her own teeth slammed down on her tongue. Hard enough to tear skin. Blood flooded her mouth, hot and coppery. It flowed over her tongue and didn't stop. More than the wound could realistically be making. Like the sin itself had turned on a tap. The world tunneled for a second. She thought she was going to choke. The blood wasn't normal. It crawled. It soaked into her tongue and wouldn't rinse away when she tried to spit. Wouldn't clear when she swiped at it with the back of her hand. Everywhere in her mouth it touched. It stained. Black sprayed out across the surface of her tongue, inking its way through the muscle like someone was sketching a new organ on top of the old one. And her tongue wasn't the only thing changing. Her wings were turning black feather by feather as she felt herself fall out of Madeline's protective grasp. Her halo sputtered out, then disappeared. The shock made her pass out. When Lexie woke up, it was under harsh lights and the antiseptic bite of a night watch base. Not the familiar shadows of her home. Her tongue ached like she'd been talking for hours. Maybe she had. It felt swollen and wrong, every swallow scraping against the new weight of her sin. The adults around her moved with that clipped, professional calm that means the worst already happened. They sat her down and told her the rest like it was a debriefing, not the end of a world. Her father, they explained, had done what no human body was meant to do. To save his children, he had used an angelic teleportation artifact, a relic calibrated for something stronger, more resilient than mortal flesh. He'd used it anyway, shoving them and himself through a door that wasn't meant for him so they would live long enough to fall into Night Watch's net instead of Sakura Claw's. Between that impossible strain and the wounds he'd already taken, it cost him his life. There was no soothing angle, no loophole, just the flat fact that he had died so they could wake up somewhere even remotely safe. They had worse news layered under that. In the chaos after the teleport, Harlan had slipped out of their reach. He had escaped, yes, but not in the way the word usually promises freedom. Freshly converted, mind cracked by transformation and trauma, he'd vanished into the tangle of streets and shadows before Nightwatch could get a clean fix on him. By the time the dust settled, they had nothing left but a smear of readings and the assumption any operative makes when a child like that goes missing. If he survived, he would not come back unchanged. Finding him would be like chasing smoke. Lexie was 8 years old, newly fallen, her tongue wrecked by a sin that turned words toxic. The people in the base told her there would be searches. They told her they would keep an eye out. But between the lines the message was simple. Her mother was gone. Her father was gone. Her brother was out there somewhere, lost to Sakura magic and the kind of hurt that rewrites a person's shape. Everything she loved had been taken or twisted, and there was no clean path to getting any of it back. Lexie was transferred to Eclipse House Orphanage, one of the places Night Watch parked the children their missions left in pieces. On paper it was a resource hub, a refuge, a chance at rebuilding. In practice it was a building full of broken edges and sharp silences. Every room holding a different version of I shouldn't be here. They did at least think about who they put her with when they assigned her a roommate. It was another trauma fallen angel. Somebody the files said might understand. Iris Featherfall had fallen to see no evil. Her own trauma carved in through the eyes instead of the tongue. Her mother had turned into a queen of hearts. And Iris had watched that new monster devour her father's heart. In the aftermath, what she had seen was too much. Carved into her soul was the moment a kid decided the world was too ugly to look at. Iris's fall left her blind, light cut off. Future shrunk to whatever she could touch. Lexie and Iris were paired up in the hope that two trauma-born taboos might shore each other up where the world had carved them down. It worked better than any of the adults expected. Lexie, who had lost almost everything, refused to let Iris lose the last of her world too. She pushed, but it was the careful push of someone who knows exactly how bad it feels to be shoved. She encouraged Iris to search for other ways of seeing, to test the edges of what her fall had taken and what it might have left behind. Through long, stubborn practice and meditation, Iris found it, aurasight, a way of reading the glow and weight of people and places even without physical eyes. The first time she described a room back to Lexie in color and motion instead of just shape, something in both of them clicked. The world wasn't gone. It had just changed. Iris's softness helped with Lexie's sin too. Where most people flinched from the black-tongued girl who couldn't seem to say anything gentle, Iris simply clarified and gently corrected. Her shy, careful questions gave Lexie a place to practice catching the worst version of every thought before it cleared her teeth. With Iris, she learned how to grind the compulsion down from nuclear to blunt, to let the words come out sharp without quite cutting to the bone. Between aurasight lessons and tongue-taming drills, the tiny dorm room at Eclipse House stopped being just another holding cell for ruined kids and started to feel like the first scrap of a home that belonged to them. That home got wider and weirder when two more kids folded into their orbit. Patrick Adams was technically a human disciple, the kind of person the files expected to be stable, holy, an example. His marks told a different story. They had been inverted the day he was forced to kill his own angel mother, the angel's safety net twisting into a quiet accusation etched into his skin. Chalice Schneider came from another kind of horror. Her family had been wiped out by a lick, and instead of breaking, she had reached out and stolen some of its power. One night, one impossible act. She walked away with eldritch light in her veins and a magical girl contract she'd never signed on purpose. On paper, none of them should have fit. A fallen cherub with a weaponized tongue, a blind aura seer, a disciple with backward marks, and a magical girl lit by stolen necromancy. In practice, they clicked like pieces that had been carved from the same wreck. They were all kids Night Watch didn't quite know what to do with. Too strange or too damaged to slot cleanly into the usual positions. So they made their own category, the Forgotten Ones instead. They shared beds and secrets and stories, traded coping mechanisms like contraband, and slowly turned Eclipse House from a place they'd been sent to into a base they chose. By the time Lexie turned 12, the adults decided she was steady enough to be more involved with the community. In Eclipse House that meant clubs, outreach, finding ways to plug these jagged kids into causes bigger than their own damage. Lexie picked Nevin's club. It made sense. Nevin had been the name whispered over prayers throughout the orphanage, the thread that had always meant justice and sharp-edged mercy instead of blind obedience. In the Nevin circle she met Kaiser Killick, a human mage blessed directly by the god himself. Kaiser was not what she expected a chosen of Nevin to look like. There was no gleaming armor, no stiff, judgmental posture. He was kind in the practical way that counts. Remembering names, noticing who sat out on the edges, making sure they got pulled into the orbit without being put on display. His devotion to Nevin wasn't loud. It was just there, solid and unwavering. That steady, unforced goodness poked a hole in the numb shell around Lex's chest. For the first time in years, she let herself wonder if someone like that might actually help her with the one thing she still wanted that felt impossible. She told him about Harlan. She didn't give him the sanitized mission report version either. Once Kaiser proved he wasn't going to flinch at her black tongue, the whole story came out. Their mother's conversion, the vow, the fall, the teleport that killed their father, the way Harlan had slipped into the cracks. Lexie had told this to adults before and watched them file it as a case instead of a wound. Kaiser listened like it hurt him. His heartache landed so real it shocked her. His eyes burned, and when he said he was sorry, it wasn't the empty, apologetic for the situation kind. It was for Harlan specifically. For her. Kaiser agreed to help her look, but he didn't dress it up. Kids broken that badly by trauma and transformation rarely ended up somewhere safe and bright. If Harlan had survived, they'd have to search the dark places, the corners of the city where Sakura magic and other underworld currents tangled. Lexie heard the warning, weighed it, and didn't flinch. There was nothing any dark alley could throw at her that was worse than admitting her brother was forever lost. Together they mapped out where to start, and the first name on that map was the Night Watch team that handled the work nobody else wanted. That was how Lexie met Aaron Ravenwood. Aaron's team took on the organization's ugliest, toughest missions, the kind of work that usually sank into redacted reports and need-to-know rumors. He was the first angel Lexie had met since her mother, who didn't look at her cherub status and see lesser. He also didn't treat her fall like a stain. If anything, the idea that surviving trauma could be tallied as sin in the goddess's eyes made him visibly angry. That crack in her armor was all the invitation she needed. One conversation turned into 10. And before she quite realized she'd made the choice, she was telling him everything. Aaron didn't flinch. He didn't stop her when her sin tried to twist her words into the ugliest possible versions. He let her vent the poison out where it couldn't hit anyone else. Then he offered her a standing deal. Anytime she needed to say the unsayable, she could come find him. He lived and worked among demons as well as angels. There was nothing her black tongue could throw at him that he hadn't heard worse from creatures literally built out of fire and ash. With him, Lexie finally had a place to bury the rot in her head without hurting the people she loved. Aaron's team hadn't seen Harlan in their travels, but they did know the city's fault lines. If a Sakura-tainted boy was drifting, there were only so many currents he could have followed. They pointed Lexie and Kaiser toward the underworld proper. Back alleys, cult hangouts, pawn shops where artifacts and rumors both changed hands. One name came up more than once when they asked for someone who paid attention to strange traffic. The Wealthy Hawk, a pawn shop owned by a basilisk named Philip Terrien. Philip was exactly the kind of meticulous hoarder Lexie needed on her side. His eyes missed nothing, and he had a good memory for faces and body language. When she showed up at his counter and described Harlan's new shape as best she could, Philip frowned thoughtfully, then admitted he had seen a Sakura bunny that didn't fit the usual predatory pattern. This one had come through with a group tied to Neon Alley, a Peter Pan worshipping group that collected lost children and refused to take Nevin's more passive role in child abuse. The city of Wood and Steel was owned by a changeling that believed in Peter's more violent approach, labeling the sins of the treacherous adults who dare abuse their children and punishing them with death. The bunny traveling with them had seemed off, quieter, less hungry. It wasn't proof, but it was the first real thread Lexie had touched in years. She started dropping by the wealthy hawk regularly after that, checking for updates, half living on the hope that Philip would say they were here yesterday or they left a message. One afternoon when she came in, it wasn't Philip at the counter but a breaker-mancer who smelled like pine needles and deep, wet soil. Corey Mills ran the till that day, and when Lexie tried her usual sharp-tongued banter, he volleyed it right back, grinning. Where other people stumbled over her bluntness, Corey danced with it. 6 months of that back and forth turned the shop into a second home. Eventually Lexie got tired of pretending it was just banter. She asked Corey out. He said yes like it was the most natural thing in the world. But he also laid his cards on the table. His heart didn't do only one person. He was already in love with a girl named Mandy Delarose and wasn't planning to stop. He wasn't testing Lexie's jealousy. He was just stating the architecture of his life. Lexie waited, thought about the way scarcity had always been used to hurt her, and decided she didn't mind. Corey was sure the two of them would click, and on that front, at least, he was absolutely right. Mandy and Lexie recognized each other almost immediately as the same kind of broken. Lexie's sin chewed up any attempt at soft language. Mandy's mental magic had been shattered, leaving her powers unstable and her head full of static. Between them, they built a pocket of quiet where that damage wasn't a liability. It was just part of how they existed. The three of them, Corey with his deep woods calm, Lexie with her scorched honesty, Mandy with her fractured mind and stubborn sweetness, settled into a rhythm. They called it what it was, a love dedicated to mending each other's broken parts, over and over, for as long as it took. Through Corey, another door opened. His Pokemon League ties reached into Neon Alley, the splinter city of wood and steel that called Peter Pan a god and took his word as law. It was where kids ran when the people who were supposed to protect them turned into monsters, and where a changeling devoted to Peter created a home and made sure those monsters didn't get a second chance. Neon Alley was loud and vicious and not even pretending to be gentle. They did not hurt children. They hunted the adults who did. At 15, following Corey down an alley full of shipping crates, Lexie finally saw her brother again. Harlan moved through the streets like he belonged there. Sakura fur and long ears and easy balance on nimble paws. The Sakura conversion and the teleport had punched holes straight through his memory. He didn't know why he was abandoned. He didn't know what had really happened to their parents. Neon Alley was the thing that had caught what was left. Justin Grimlock's crew had given him a purpose that made sense of the blur and a job that made use of his instincts. Hunt the ones who hurt kids. Protect the alleys. Simple, brutal, survivable. The first time Harlan's gaze slid over her, there was nothing. Just another stranger. Then something snagged. His ears twitched. His eyes narrowed like he was hearing a tune he couldn't place. When she said his name, her sin lunged for the cruelest possible version. You left me here, and twisted it into her throat. Lexie bit it back until it hurt. All that came out was Harlan. It landed like a thrown knife. He flinched, not in fear, but like the word had hit an old bruise. Her brother was somewhere under the Sakura bunny shell. She just couldn't reach it on her own. She went to Theodore Shire, a mage and one of Night Watch's most brilliant paladins, for help. When Lexie dumped the whole tangled mess in his living room, Sakura Magic, Lost Time, a bunny boy who lived in a neon-lit city for lost children, Theo didn't flinch. He drew 2 lines, one for who Harlan had been, one for who Harlan was now. The work, he said, was not erasing the second line in favor of the first. It was finding a way to let both exist in the same body. The first step was memory. Harlan started coming to see Theo, slipping out when he had free time to sit cross-legged in a cramped room and let someone carefully pry through the blank spots in his head. It was slow, ugly work. Sometimes a detail snapped back into focus like a bone setting wrong and left him shaking. Sometimes a whole session slid off nothing at all, his mind too tired to pick at scars. Lexie sat in when he let her, chewing her tongue bloody to keep from spitting accusations her sin desperately wanted to frame as truth. Bit by bit, though, pieces came home. Stained glass shadows. Their father's hand. Their mother's arms covered in fur. The moment of pink light swallowing his shape. The way Lexie had screamed his name just before everything went white. Once they had enough of Harlan's old self back on the board that he could consent to more than survival, Theo floated the second line of attack. The Sakura magic in his body wasn't just trauma. It was an active, hungry system. If they could convince it to contract without ripping it out, there was a chance he could reclaim something closer to his old form. It would not be a cure. It would be a negotiation conducted in alchemy, and negotiations like that always charged both sides' interest. Lexie volunteered herself for the lab work without being asked. Between Theo's methodical notes and her own knack for pushing volatile things right up to the edge without flinching, they built an alchemic concoction key to Harlan's specific mess of angelic light and Sakura bloom. Every trial meant watching him weather something ugly. Tremors, nausea, pain spiking so hard he had to grip the chair and breathe through his teeth. By the time they were ready to give him the final dose, everyone in the room understood exactly what he was putting on the line. When Harlan finally drank it, it didn't look like a miracle. It looked like a boy curled on a clinic cot, sweating through borrowed shirts while Lexie held his hand hard enough to bruise. It was hours of fever and shivering and flashes of pink light under his skin. It was the moment where his breathing stuttered and Lexie was sure they had pushed it too far. Then, slowly, the fur receded. Feathers pushed their way back through skin. His halo sparked, guttered, and came back as a narrow, stubborn ring. When he sat up, shaking, he was an angel again. Or close enough that the word fit without tasting like a lie. Close enough did not mean healed. The Sakura magic never left. It only retreated. His wings stayed stained a very light pink, as if the bloom had soaked too deep to wash out. Some nights the craving still hit so hard he had to walk the streets and alleys of Fair Silver until they passed. He remained in Neon Alley, running missions with Justin's crew and watching over the kids who came after him. But now he did it with his memories back in his own hands. For Lexie, that was enough. She had her brother back. Not the boy he had been before the light, but the person he had become stitched together with the one she remembered. Nowadays Lexie lives and works out of Eclipse House, the orphanage that became the closest thing she has to a fixed point. Even though Patrick was adopted by the Wyatt family, the two have remained close. She partners with Kaiser to find places for the angels, and Humans Night Watch have quietly written off, matching kids who fall through the cracks with people outside the organization who might actually deserve them. When Aaron's group needs someone who can walk into a room full of donors and talk about blood and failure without flinching, she is the one who shows up, turning her own history into a reason to keep the lights on and the doors open. Her off hours are just as claimed. Corey and the rest of Organization 13 have become a second family. All sharp jokes and weaponized banter that make room for the parts of her everyone else once called too much. Mandy drags her to the mall to argue over skirts and eyeliner. Lexie daring Mandy to lean into darker palettes while Mandy shoves softer colors at her just to see what sticks. At night, when the city is all sodium glow and shadow, Lexie slips back into Neon Alley to run missions alongside Harlan and the rest of his crew, moving through the back streets and neighborhoods of Fair Silver. It is not the quiet, grateful life she once thought was the best she could hope for. It is a full, dangerous, stubbornly bright one, packed with people she has chosen and who, impossibly, keep choosing her back. Personality. Lexie comes off sugar-sweet and soft-voiced, but she is protective to the point of viciousness when it comes to kids and the people she has decided are hers. She is sharp-smart in a way that sees straight through systems and adults who lie to themselves. And she does not waste time pretending the world is nicer than it is. Her humor and stories run extremely dark because that is the only honest way she knows to talk about what happened to her. And she refuses to pretty it up to make anyone else comfortable. Lexie is startlingly open about blood, faith and failure when she trusts someone. And her blunt way of speaking means she tends to say the quiet part out loud even when it makes the room flinch. Appearance. Lexie is a 17-year-old girl with a lolly height. So short she reads as child-sized at a glance, but her build is toned rather than fragile. She has caramel skin, Isabelline white hair and mint cream eyes that give her a soft, almost sugared look at first pass. Her wings are pitch black, a clear fallen cherub mark that cuts hard against her lighter palette. Lexie dresses in a pastel goth style with just enough feminine flair worked in to make Mandy happy, mixing softer colors and details into darker pieces in a way that still feels like her. Abilities. Sanctified blasphemy, born from the moment she vowed to wipe out every Sakura bunny in existence. Her sing gathers in her throat every time she bites her tongue and holds back. When she finally stops filtering and lets it pour out, the backed-up filth and blasphemy hit like a blast of psychic and faith damage that can rattle even hardened adults. She almost never lets it fully off the leash, saving it for people who have already chosen to be monsters. Guardian's mantle, after being shoved into caretaker roles for her little brother, then Eclipse House, then the Nevin kids. She learned to read rooms, make calls, and carry consequences long before she was old enough for any of it. That weight settled into a steady authority that makes even older hunters listen when she snaps an order. She uses it to keep panicked kids focused, to pull reckless teammates back from the edge, and to remind adults that someone is watching how they treat the people under them. Trail of the Guilty, the same obsession that once had her mapping every path a Sakura bunny could take turned into a deadly precise hunting instinct. She can pick up on little tells, patterns and routes that point straight toward someone who is hiding abuse or a kid who is trying to disappear. Lexie uses that sharpened sense to track down predatory adults, follow the trails they leave through a city, and find the children who need a way out. That's it for bold Lexie. I love how unapologetic she is in everything she does. Goodbye for now everyone, and I'll see you next time for more amazing stories.